More to marketing.
Welcome to More to Marketing, the podcast that explores marketing, product, and everything business. I'm your host, Susan, and we're talking about how most marketers don't know the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. And this is very important when they're doing the messaging. But it also shows with a blend of why CEOs distrust the marketing department. And it really is because of them. And we're going to talk to our special guest today about how this can be avoided. I am so thrilled to welcome Gee today. Gee is a seasoned marketing expert and CEO. He's known for his practical approach to modern business strategies. With years of experience blending traditional marketing insights and cutting-edge digital practices, he has become a voice of authority in navigating the complexity of today's market. And he also is a lecturer in this topic as well, so he knows his shit. He is widely recognized for his thought leadership, focusing on aligning marketing effectiveness with overarching business goals. His insights are frequently sought out by leaders looking to bridge that gap between the strategic vision and the operational execution. Welcome, Gee. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much, Susan. How are you doing? I'm delighted to be invited.
I am doing fabulous. Now I get to meet you and talk to you about all things marketing, one of my favorite topics. But I want to know more about you, your story, your CEO. Tell me about how this all came about.
Well, excuse me. Well, I've been marketing for a long time, Susan. Okay. I've been marketing since the days of dial-up internet. I've been marketing since the days of AOL CDs. Remember them? Remember AOL CDs?
I know cassettes.
Okay. Well, that'll do. I don't remember AOL cassettes though. For 7 years, I was sitting on the other side of the table. I was the worldwide director of marketing for a software company, serving blue chip clients such as brands such as Time Inc., IKEA, Nestle, Airbus, and Marvel. But when I was there, whenever I invited marketing agencies to come and pitch for our business, I was shocked at how pretty much none of them would take any sort of fiduciary responsibility for the marketing plans they proposed. Okay. So they were all interested in the tactical stuff, web and design and ads and events and all that sort of stuff. But nobody was asking me about the business result on which the marketing plan needed to deliver. Okay, which I thought
very
was
frustrating.
I thought it's just crazy. I mean, and then I sort of thought, okay, there must be a ton of startups and small businesses out there who need help with marketing from a business perspective. Okay, so designing and managing a marketing plan that generates qualified leads to ultimately produce a tangible commercial difference to their business. Okay,
Well, that's
so
the whole point of marketing, isn't it?
you would think, right? So this was all back in 2008. Okay, so the internet was beginning to affect our daily lives, right? Okay, but it was the big brands who were taking advantage of the potential at the time, because obviously they had greater technical experience and resources and deeper pockets. So smaller businesses were getting left behind. Okay, so, if you remember 2008, the iPhone had just launched. Affordable broadband was something, normal people, everyday people could consider, right? So there was like a perfect storm going on. So I thought that there was an opportunity for a marketing resource aimed at small businesses and startups to help them leverage the power of online. And I couldn't find a marketing agency that took that kind of approach. So, we started our own.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that was, like I said, that was back in 2008, which you probably remember was not exactly the best time to start a business. Right. But, with not a small amount of luck and the support of some fantastic clients at the time, we weathered the storm of the post-boom recession, and 16 odd years later, here we are. We're 19 people in 9 countries. We've helped over 400 startups and small to medium-sized businesses in various types of engagements. And on top of that, for the past 10 years now, I've been teaching. You know what they say about people who can't do, they teach, right? So
I think you
I've been
can
teaching.
do 400 shows as you can do.
Well, maybe. So I've been teaching marketing and behavioral science to final year MBA students at two business schools. And yeah, that's pretty much brings us up to date. That's me, really.
So tell us, where can we find out about your company? What's the URL? What are the main services? I'd love to know a bit more about your business itself so everyone knows how to check you out.
Well, the agency is called Kexino, which is Kexino, which can be found at kexino.com, would you believe? To find out more about me, the agency, obviously you can go there. To get a sort of snapshot of who we are, what we do, and why we think we're different, probably the fastest way of doing that is to look me up on LinkedIn. Now, you're going to find this amazing, Susan, but you'll not believe, do you know there's only one Gee Ranasinha on LinkedIn? Can you believe that?
I can't believe
Amazing.
that because
Isn't that
usually there's at
amazing?
least another one. You
You
sure
would
you
have
don't have a
thought.
clone somewhere and you're hiding them?
Probably, but maybe he or she is too bashful. So you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll put a link in the show notes and all that sort of stuff as well. So people who
100%.
people who are listening and want to find out more, they can find me there. But otherwise, find me on LinkedIn because I do tend to rant and find specific topics. I post 2 videos a week, every week, which I've been doing for about 2.5 years now on LinkedIn.
That's
And then small, easy to digest video snippets. They're all about a minute long, so it's not asking too much of anyone's time. And it's about a particular subject that's pissing me off at that particular moment,
and
whatever it may be.
it's good humor in it as well.
Sometimes, yeah, I do tend to try to interject a little bit of humour into whole things. All work and no play, you know what they say.
Exactly. Fantastic. No, I think that's wonderful. I'll make sure all the details are in the show notes as well, because you really are an expert in marketing and you've been able to help so many businesses to achieve greatness and show the marketing results. So, actual return on investment is possible with marketing. But I think this brings us, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to say, firstly, it's very nice of you to say that I'm expert. I don't think I'm an expert. I don't think anybody's an expert. I think as soon as you say expert, you're already on a slippery slope of decline, really, because you're sort of resting on your laurels. And what I like to think is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? So I'm just reading this book, and I'm a chapter ahead of some other people, and that's it. We're all in this together, and we need to sort of have each other's backs because, firstly, because the environment is changing and technology isn't changing. Some things are not changing, which many people who call themselves marketers. Notice I didn't call them marketers. I call them people who call themselves marketers. Right?
Yes, I did.
Many people who call themselves marketers tend to forget that there are many more things that are not changing than are things that are changing. Okay, and I think we need to have more voices about people who can stand up and say where we should focus our attention and where we shouldn't, and what is bullshit and what is not. I like to think of myself as the boy who's calling out to say the king's got no clothes on.
And everyone else is pretending that he's dressed.
Yeah. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation being spread within our industry. There are a lot of what I call marketing bros. The marketing bros. The guys who say all you need to do is follow them or buy their course.
Oh, their
Or
book.
those or their book, right? And they'll show you their bank statements you know, and they'll be crouching in front of a Lambo throwing gang signs.
Yep.
You know those guys, right? So those are the guys who will steal your money, dear listener. Keep away from those guys, because this week they're into marketing. Last week they were into Web3 or NFT. Remember NFTs? Mm-hmm. Who talks about NFTs? No, right. No, but nobody talks about that stuff anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And tomorrow they'll be into something else. Crypto, AI, or those silly Apple goggle things, or something else. Mm-hmm. They'll be into some other crap because they're just looking for the next shiny object.
Exactly. And I think that brings us really well into our topic of today about how we can foster and build trust with CEOs so that they don't think marketing are full of shit.
Well, you see, the thing is, half the CEOs are right, because half of the people who've got marketing in their job titles are full of shit.
Very, very, I don't disagree completely, but we want to make the marketing people helpful, useful, contribute.
Well, you see, it doesn't matter, Susan, right? It doesn't matter, because everybody who's listening to this podcast are the other half of the marketing.
They can share it with the other half.
Yeah, well, but do we want them to share it, or do we want these other guys just to sort of die off, right? The asteroid has landed, and now they just need to... It's Darwinian, this stuff, right? They need to go away. Because the industry is full of idiots. We don't need any more.
Very, very true. But let's go down to simple terms here to try and help the more simple of us. You talk about efficiency and effectiveness in marketing, and it's crucial for people to understand it. Teach this idiot here what that means.
No such thing as an idiot. No such thing as an idiot. Okay, so I think there's a confusion at a business level between efficiency and effectiveness. And I think before we can break this down and why there's a confusion and why we as marketers need to look at effectiveness rather than efficiencies, firstly, we have to make sense of the terms of the words that we're using, right? Correct. So, effectiveness. What do I mean when I say effectiveness? By effectiveness, I mean how well we're doing in achieving a particular goal. How successful we are in delivering on what we set out to do. Okay? Mm-hmm. Efficiency, on the other hand, is a ratio. Efficiency is about how much input we make to deliver a particular output. Okay?
Yep.
So what we're doing from an efficiency perspective is not trying to get the best possible result for what we're doing. We're looking to reduce the amount of input, which can be effort, it could be money, it could be resources, to deliver a certain level of output. Right? But the problem with that is by chasing metrics based around efficiency, we get to the point where we are now, where so many businesses end up looking and saying the same thing as one another, because we've exorcised the creativity out of the equation. Because if you look at the makeup of a outwardly facing campaign, whatever it may be, ads, social, video, podcasts, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. We can measure effort, we can measure media spend, we can categorize and quantify those sorts of elements that make up a piece of output, but we can't quantify something like creativity. We can't say, okay, for this campaign, we're going to spend $367 worth of creativity on it, right? Because there's no such thing, right? So what we end up doing is we get this anemic, vanilla, generic output. I mean, if you look at most of the marketing that you see today from companies in a similar category, okay, 10 will get you 5 that if you covered up the logo, the exact same piece of marketing could be used by pretty much anybody.
The car industry is notorious for this.
Absolutely, right? Like I said, we've exorcised the creativity out of the equation, right? Instead of doing the basics of marketing, all the, research, segmentation, positioning, messaging, target, all that stuff, we've come to the conclusion that bad marketing that's more targeted is a better idea than great marketing that's spread wider. Which is the reason why people who call themselves marketers have to resort to things like tracking cookies and remarketing tags and programmatic and, customer profiles and all other shit, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also the reason why we have things like GDPR and CCPA and PIPL and CPRA and CDPA and loads of other four-letter acronyms. Right. Yeah. Okay, so businesses have created... They've tried to look at marketing like it's been another part, like any other part of the business, which is pragmatic, logical, and repeatable, regardless of context.
It has to fit that box. Yeah.
So they've created like a data-driven, repeatable process, as they would in manufacturing, right? But the problem is that process is now devoid of any creativity, any salience or resonance. And then they moan that their marketing doesn't work. Okay? So the thing is, within business, efficiency is a good thing. Okay? If you're manufacturing something...
Oh, yeah, you got the Lean Six Sigma and everything. Yeah.
Right, exactly. If you can reduce the production costs while maintaining the quality or even increase productivity, then that's a good thing, right? But something like marketing doesn't work that way. It never has, and it never will. Okay? If you're chasing effectiveness, what you're actually about is maximizing the outcome of a particular tactic or combination of tactics. It's about achieving the biggest success you can, rather than efficiency, which is getting the best result you can for a particular level of effort or investment. Okay, which is a totally different thing. Okay, so since efficiency is a ratio between input and output, maximizing efficiency is about reducing input, which is often why we have, so many, let's call them heated discussions between the finance department and the marketing department.
Just a few.
Right? Right. Like, if I spend like $1 on marketing and I get $10 in sales, that's efficient.
Extremely.
Right? But supposing I spend $3 to get that same $10 return today, but as a result, that $10 grows to like $50 next week and $250 next month. What's the better plan? Okay.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to understanding about the marketing people to know how this effectiveness is going to help them to be able to talk back into the C-suite, whether it's the finance CEO, whoever it is, to be able to show them going down this path is better because it is going to have the better returns.
You see, marketing is one of those complex fields of human activity where efficiency and effectiveness are not very well correlated. Okay? I mean, there are others. For example, the example I always use is military strategy. Okay? Military strategy cannot be rational. Because if it's rational, then your enemy can work out what you're going to do in advance. Right? So you're pretty much screwed.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. So the way I define marketing effectiveness is the process of improving business performance from marketing activities that's made easier and more impactful by people, data, tools, and measurement, sure, but a strong and clear focus on the end result to to resonate with the target audience, which gets back to the measurement stuff. Nobody knows how to measure this shit, and
I think that's where the confusion comes in as well.
well, we're conflating effectiveness measurements with efficiency measurements, right? Effectiveness measurements are how well a piece of creative is done, while efficiency measurements are how well we spent our budget, which are two very, very different things.
100%.
Okay.
And I can see how a lot of marketers confuse that and then confuse the business team about it as well, because they're presenting the wrong metrics potentially at the wrong time to do signal cues within the business.
Absolutely. Anything that has the word per in it probably is an efficiency metric. Cost per click, cost per lead, cost per view. Okay. So in the same way, anything that's got the word return in its name is probably an efficiency metric. Return on investment, return on ad spend, right? Effectiveness metrics are not things like number of leads, number of conversions, and so on, because we're not comparing it to anything. Okay? Okay, this campaign generated X amount of conversions. Great. But compared to what? What are we comparing it to? Plus, how does that stand up against the status quo, which is doing nothing? Unless you can come up with that information, all of these numbers are nonsense.
I think a lot of companies forget to do the benchmark, do nothing, and what it could equal as part of their business casing for what they're going to do when it comes to spending. And that's across the board, not just marketing, but for any activity. I think it's something that is very poorly done and needs to be have more attention focused on it.
The only way you can measure effectiveness properly is by measuring what we call marginal incremental revenue, which means, okay, so we've done a particular marketing tactic. So how much revenue did that particular marketing tactic generate for us over whatever timescale makes sense for that particular tactic, compared to us not doing anything at all? Factoring in the fact that there is a latency with marketing tactics. We're seeing the results of marketing now based upon what we did 3, 6, maybe 12 months ago. And just in the same way, what we do today, you may not see the results for weeks or months in advance. Now, there's lots of ways to measure these things, and it depends on, your business, your customer profile, your industry, your customer acquisition costs, the expectations of the market, lots of things. And this is why retargeting is such a load of shit, because retargeting effectiveness is never ever measured against a negative control book. You never have an idea whether buyers bought because of your retargeting campaign or whether they were already in market and would have bought eventually on their own. You don't know.
Could that be then solved by having better surveys or end of purchase? How did you come about purchasing this today to help get more of an understanding? What would you do to try and help marketers understand where the decision was made and if it had an impact or not by doing that retargeting campaign?
I think it totally depends on the type of industry you're in. If you're a B2B SaaS, for example, it's going to be very different to if you're like a D2C e-commerce selling, fast fashion or something, where, for that kind of business, then it's, retarget is probably going to be pretty effective. but those sorts of businesses are based upon numbers, right? It's filling that funnel as high as you can because you're only making, tiny amounts on each sale.
Mm.
I don't think there's a hard or fast rule, and I think this is where things like experimentation comes in, where you can do proper testing. If you're a B2C vendor selling, high margin, high ticket deals to a small number of buyers, then it's going to be a very different tactical plan to something which is, selling B2C and you're looking at, hundreds of thousands of SKUs and maybe hundreds of thousands of transactions in a month. It's going to be very different. But I think there's too many people who are expecting hard and fast rules that apply to everything for everyone, for any type of business, for any type of customer, and those sorts of situations don't happen. They don't exist.
We're all too unique.
Absolutely, and that should be the marketing strength, really, because you know when things are working effectively for you. And sure, you can certainly use the examples and case studies for, parallel businesses, but that's just a starting point, and it's not it's certainly not the end point. But not only do most people who call themselves marketers not realize that, but they can't fight their corner to be able to articulate that at a board level, to have non-marketers, I call them civilians, right? have them understand how marketing works. It's not, there is wastage in marketing. It's a fact.
It has to be, because not everyone converts.
Right, and also because of what we're talking about. If you look at any other part of the business, if you look at product, if you look at R&D, certainly if you look at anything in finance, it's a very logical, sequential, pragmatic approach. 1 + 1 is always 2, and you know every element of the equation that affects the result, right? But in marketing you don't, because the target of our efforts are humans, and humans are anything but rational, are anything but logical, methodical, right? We change our opinions on a sixpence, and so many of our buying decisions are context dependent. And this sort of stuff is the things that scares economists and finance people to death, because they're looking for sequential, logical progress. But you can't do that, because many of the variables that influence a buying decision are anything but logical.
Just when you take a child to a shop, they may have in their head, I just want to get a lollipop. That might be the one thing they've got. They've gone to the shop with mum or dad. I just want a lollipop. I want to go there. And then when you go there, chaos. Anything and everything could happen. They could be running underneath the clothing racks. They'll be scaling some of the toy racks to get to that big giant toy at the very top of it. And you walk out with something very completely different to what you originally logically thought you were walking in to purchase, because behavior changed in the context of when you got there.
Another example. That's a perfect example, but I've got 2 more, okay?
Bring them.
IKEA.
Oh, yes.
Tell me anybody who comes out of IKEA with exactly the shit that they wanted to go before they went into IKEA. Does not happen. Does not happen. Right? The other example I wanted to give was that outside of marketing, in manufacturing, in R&D, in finance, all of these variables, all of these influences that affect the result are measured and exchanged in common units of, or that everybody under, common measurable units, right? So like a kilogram is always a kilogram, right? 100 degrees Celsius is 100 degrees Celsius, whether you're in Sydney, Singapore, or Sheffield, right? A calorie is a calorie.
Yep.
You know, even Americans use calories, right? But if we think about some of the things that affect our buying decisions, things like fear, things like anger, things like regret, things like, you look at the insurance industry. That's an entire industry built on fear, right? All of these things, there's no such thing as a standard SI unit of fear, right? Yet these are all things that can influence a buying decision, positively or negatively.
Yeah. One of my pet hates is the NPSs and touchpoint NPSs are scored 1 to 10, particularly when there are individuals out there who may have had the best service, the best experience, but refuse to ever give anything 10 out of 10. Because that is how they are. That's their uniqueness. But you'll never know that. You just assume you're only worth 9 out of 10, or whatever the score they happen to give you, because I'll never give you a perfect score. I'm sure you remember teachers that probably did that to you at school if you did an essay, and they actually tell it to you when they hand it back to you. I only gave you 99 out of 100 because I never give 100%. There are people out there, and you can't predict that behavior.
I think it's worse than that. Because I think, qualitative analysis, NPS scores are reliant upon customers telling the truth and not telling you what they think, either what they think you want to hear or what they think they should be telling you.
Yep.
Now, sometimes they can be doing it consciously, but often they can be doing it unconsciously. Because we lie about the real reasons why we buy things.
That makes complete sense. And it's also probably dependent on product, service, and industry too.
Very much so. To a lesser extent, but at the end of the day, whether it's B2B or B2C, and excluding commodities, anything we buy, B2B or B2C, we're buying emotionally. And then we're post-rationalizing logically. Right? We tell ourselves a story to justify the reason why we've done it. Now, the justification is different depending on B2B or B2C. You know, if it's B2B, if I come back, under the influence of some falling down water on a Friday night, and I suddenly hit Amazon, for example, and I end up buying some imported Chinese shit for $50, right? And it turns up and it's got a guarantee of 5 minutes, right? Okay, mea culpa, it's down to me. Stupid G, what are you thinking? Right? I'm down $50. My wife probably laughs maniacally at my stupidity. But, nobody died, okay? But if I'm buying something B2B, I'm spending somebody else's money, number one.
Might be a lot too.
Could be a lot, yeah. And also, if it doesn't go according to plan, that's my arse, right? I could be skipped in the next round of promotions. I could even lose my job. At the very least, when I wander in the office canteen, there are people pointing and smirking and saying, he's the one who made us buy that fucking Okie Kokie 2000 that hasn't frigging worked since the day it's been put in, right? The secret of selling B2B is making the buyer look so good that they get a promotion.
Mm. It's the best decision.
I mean, there's this old saying. It's about 50 years old. Nobody ever got fired from buying IBM, right? You've probably heard it. Okay.
I have.
Yeah. So what it means is, everybody bought this particular solution for a reason. Probably not because it's the best, not because it's the best value for money, not because it offers the best service, not because it's got the best features, but because everybody else got it.
Mm.
Right? And you know what you're getting. What you're buying in B2B half the time is risk variance insurance by buying the category leader. That's why category leaders don't change in B2B for decades.
Mm.
Right? And it's also why breaking in to B2B is so difficult, especially at the enterprise level, because it's a closed shop. Right? What you're selling in effect is not features, price, value, ease of deployment, whatever. What you're selling is trust. We're all selling the same thing. Because nobody wants to buy a lemon. So what you're doing with your marketing is actually giving the buyer reassurance that they're not going to be screwed and laughed at by their peers or shouted at by their boss for going against the general way of thinking within their industry by going with your solution as opposed to the category leader. And that's a tough sell, especially if you're going from an efficiency metric where you're just listing a bunch of bullet points or features that everybody else has got and expecting the customer to join the dots themselves. It's never going to happen, is it?
Exactly. And going back to one of your points, you were talking about emotional decisions. How how can you even do marketing based on efficiency when it is based on emotional? That is where the effectiveness comes in. So you must have the effectiveness within your campaigns to resonate with those audiences, because effectiveness is the only way that you can achieve that. They're not going to care about efficiencies.
But it's easier to sell efficiency than effectiveness to the board.
Very
Because
true.
because efficiency can be driven by MarTech, by data, by AI, by whatever other bullshit. And if you follow a rigor-based process and you come to the wrong answer, everybody will say, "Oh, poor you," right? You did everything right. Look at the numbers. They all told you to go left when you should have gone right. Poor you, right? But if instead you went on emotional-based decisions, right? You did customer surveys, industry research, all of that good stuff, actually looked from a behavioural aspect, from an emotional contextual aspect, and made a wrong call. People say, well, what the fuck did you go that way? The numbers were saying to do this. It's the validity of that type of direction doesn't have the backing of rational, pragmatic, finance, economist type mindsets, which pervades the upper echelons of business. All of these people around the board table have come from engineering, finance type backgrounds.
Yeah.
So they don't do fluff. They don't do emotions. Right? That's just, that's too West Coast US tie-dye, sit under a pyramid list, have faith in the power of the crystal, right? It's just too hippy-dippy shit.
Well, how do we get them to move and consider this? I'm not going to call it hippie shit, but the effectiveness. How do we get them to realize the value in doing something that differentiates the business marketing wise, to take a risk, it might just be a toe in the water as a tactical campaign. What tactics have you used to try and sway those C-suites to at least go on the journey, to at least attempt it, to see what the value is that could come out of going down the more emotional effectiveness instead of the efficiency route?
I think the onus is on marketers who have actually done a shit job of marketing. And I don't mean shit job of marketing their business or their product. I mean, now they've done a shit job of marketing themselves. Because what they're doing is they're coming up with all of this marketing jargon that, privately we all enjoy and love and share and, get off on, and there's all sort of this stuff. But you start talking about things like salience and resonance and excess share of voice and this sort of stuff around a boardroom table, they'll lock you up. They'll give you one of those jackets that do up at the back. They think you're off your head. The problem is we don't speak board. Right? Marketers don't speak the language of the boardroom, which is the language of finance. Mm. And see, the thing is, finance and marketing are actually coming at the problem from two totally different directions, okay? So on the one hand, if you look at marketing, we're bringing insights based on the understanding of what customers perceive as the value the business brings to them, mm-hmm. and what they're prepared to pay for, right? Finance, on the other hand, are looking at efficiency in the operations of the business with ways to deliver the customer value at the lowest possible cost.
Yes.
Right?
Best return possible.
Right. And this is where the methodology and processes of finance and marketing diverge. Because if you look at marketing, typically, if we're honest with ourselves, right, we overpromise and we underdeliver. Okay? Right? We push up business costs against a return that doesn't always sufficiently justify its position. Which, obviously, if we take it to the extremes, then the operational costs end up being too high and, the organisation goes out of business. The problem is finance goes too far the other way. What finance are doing, they're trying to engineer a business cost structure for the assumption that any cost is a bad thing and should be avoided at all opportunities. So what happens is ultimately we underdeliver on the customer value component. And the result is reducing costs by too much is the value element is eroded and the business goes out of business. Okay? Customer no longer sees the product or service as being worth the purchase price. So you get to the same end result. And the problem that we're doing or failing to do is having our message to the C-suite or stakeholders to be seen as equally important as the message that the CFO would be giving to the table. But since we used a different set of terms unique to our own environment, much of what we're talking about goes straight over the head of an average CEO, CFO or CEO. Okay? So it's a problem of language. It's a problem of presenting information in a way that's easily understandable to our audience. Marketing 101. Really?
I think so.
You would think, wouldn't you? But we don't do it. We don't do it. We need to have a better understanding of the finance world. Mm. And if we can articulate that in ways and words that they understand, they can recognize how our thought processes and measurements are different to the way that finance people understand them, and we can be aware of the need to reframe that information. But we don't do that. And worse, we use finance terms in a marketing context. Mm. Right? If you say something like, ROI to a finance person, it means something totally different to what a marketer says an ROI is, which makes a mockery of what we're saying when we're talking at that sort of level.
Exactly. I think one of the most successful things that I've ever done when I used to run product slash marketing, I would actually involve the commercial team. So I would have my plan. I would have what I think it will achieve, why I'm doing it, all my tactical ways I was going to do it, and all those costs. And I'd sit down with my commercial counterpart and I'd go through it with them so they understood. Then we'd work out the commercials together. We would bounce things if I didn't quite agree. I thought, no, I could make more here or could reduce here, or the wastage or whatever it might be within the financial costings. And then we would present it as a team. Because if we were then presenting into C-suite, it was a team of product marketing and finance are saying yes to this. And that made it such a easier conversation when you went into C-suite for that final endorsement, because they knew, one, I had done my due diligence as a product marketer, but also finance had understood it and would say, yes, it's a risk worth taking. We can see the benefits of X, Y, Z in the other language too. And I found that a really great way to be able to get the C-suite faster through and faster approvals. And I was watching other team members not doing the same strategy as me and getting kicked out.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just being told, no, you come back with better numbers, come back after you talk to finance, come back after you have actually done some more due diligence on this. We don't agree. But almost every single one of mine would get through because I had done that pre-work and alignment to ensure that it was always in the right language, as you're calling it. So everyone was on the page straight away and I could get that approval or endorsement faster.
I think that's perfect, and I think the only way you can improve on that is to get sales teams involved.
Right? I happened to wear that hat too at the time, so it was kind of like I was wearing like multiple hats.
Because I think in many businesses you've got marketing and sales at opposite ends of the net, right? And that comes down to how the difference of opinion in the terms of the quality of a sales lead or what a lead is. Right, and opinions that marketing have of the sales team and vice versa, right? And nowadays, as we come into 2025, still having these teams as separate silos, I just think is absolutely ridiculous.
Agree. You're all going for the common goal.
It should be revenue ops. It shouldn't be marketing and sales. And yet we're still doing everything like it's like 1946 or something. It's just ridiculous because that's the way it's always been done.
And it's something that needs to be challenged because you are all working together. There shouldn't be silos. There's complementary skills and complementary ways that you can work with clients or prospects or whatever you are working towards gathering to make your business stronger. So by being
I think it also comes down at a fundamental level of how the business is structured, because historically sales teams have had their remuneration package structured in a different way to marketing teams, support teams, customer service teams. Why is that? Why should it be like that? I would contend that it doesn't need to be like that. Not only that, it shouldn't be like that.
It's also a bit of potential.
Sorry to interrupt, but why does an existing customer who's looking to maybe upgrade their installation, why do they want to speak to the engineer who comes and services their kit, or to the support person who's at the other end of the phone, rather than their sales rep? Why do they want to do that? Because they know sales reps just looking to make quota. They just want to do their numbers. They just want to sell them shit.
They might not even know what's under the hood to be able to help them with the
They probably
issues or
don't.
roadmap they want to do.
Right. But there's a level of trust. There's a relationship with these other people who are actually closing the deal. The salesman's just getting the signature. Okay, everybody in sales is now saying, gee, what the fuck are you talking about? We do a hell of a lot more than that. Okay, I'm simplifying things, dear listener. I'm not actually saying that that's how it all is. But the point is that revenue isn't generated at the point of signing the line that is dotted. Just like nobody ever buys because of seeing one particular piece of marketing output, right? It's a combination of all of that from an experiential level is what moves the customer from one place to another. In which case, we all need to get a piece of that pie.
I'd also go further. One of the recent discussions I've been having with my team is how do you define success when you're talking to a client? And a lot of companies in the past that I've worked for or seen have only ever done one based on let's do client success for the end of the year. We do one score similar to NPS and send it out. I think that is completely wrong because there's two different areas that should be measured. One, sales team or account manager, whatever you want to call them. How effective are they for me? Am I happy with them? Are they checking in on me regularly? Are they telling me about the new things coming up, of the new characteristics I could potentially jump into, or other things like features, all those kind of magical things? Are they telling me about it? And two, the service I get from the actual IT support or customer care team. They should be completely separated and have numbers or whatever you want to measure it done differently, because combining it, I think, washes it and you don't have a true understanding of how are you helping that client. Are they getting what they need, and where could they get more assistance? So that's one of my big pet peeves, is when that score is just settled on one as a client success measure.
I get where you're coming from, but to take a contrary position, and it's a question really, does the customer see it as being two separate entities? Because I don't think the customer does. I think if the customer is speaking to sales or support or pre-sales or after sales or accounting, right, they see that as the same interaction at a brand level, and they don't make a distinction. So maybe we need to be more granular in the way that we measure internal objectives, but maybe less granular in terms of the overall customer success score, whatever we want to call it.
I appreciate that point of view. I've experienced it and seen it where they've actually said, I wish I could score things differently because I never hear from my salesperson, but my IT support is amazing. I love them. They're helping me.
Right.
So I 100% agree with you. I've seen both where some don't care, but I've seen some industries where it is very separated within the business of who talks to who as well and who supports who.
No, what's clear is the way that we're doing it is broken, and it needs to be revised and reviewed. What that end game looks like, I don't have the answer, but I think it needs exploration.
Definitely. And that would just improve the business, increase the efficiency, but then you can be more effective when it comes to how you do the marketing, the services, everything else behind it. So again, by looking at businesses and seeing how you can do improvements and remove wastage, but help the client at the same time, you can achieve so many greater goals out of it.
I think also you get intel that you wouldn't have got any other way as well.
Agree.
Directly from the customer, because otherwise half the time if we're honest, we're waving a wet finger in the air, aren't we? We don't know until we test. We don't know. We put a hypothesis together and then we try to prove or disprove it. So
Very true.
we're burning the company mother, only to find out now actually that was a dead end, right? You know, 50% of marketers. I read it. I think it was eMarketer. Read it. 50% of marketers haven't spoken to a customer in the past 6 weeks, which I think is scandalous. What the fuck are you doing all day?
Yep.
You know. And if marketing is supposed to be bringing the voice of the customer to the boardroom, then we deserve to be treated like shit because we're not doing our jobs.
That poor
You know what
customer's not being
we
heard.
we want to bury ourselves in putting AI images in Canva templates and calling that marketing. I mean, for God's sake. No disrespect to Canva. I love you guys. I know Canva's an Aussie company. We're going to wave that flag. No, nothing against Canva. I love you guys. But the point is, it's a tool
Yes.
used by tools, unfortunately, but it is a tool, right?
Very
And
true.
it needs to be used judiciously, right? I could spend $1,000 on a set of kitchen knives. Doesn't make me fucking Gordon Ramsay though, does it? Right? And that's the
I
point.
really don't want you to become Gordon Ramsay either.
No, I think there's only one room in this world for one Gordon Ramsay, and that's already probably about 80% too much, right? No, that's not. But I could spend 10 grand on a camera. It doesn't make me Annie Leibovitz, does it? So it's the same thing. Right, all of these things are tools, and unless we know how to use it, I think we're seeing this with AI. There's a backlash now with AI because people have realised that it's not the be all and end all, and we're creating all of this shit, and it's not bringing home the bacon. It's not generating revenue. Yes, we're doing it cheaper. Yes, it's very quote efficient, but if the result is bringing in less revenue, then why are we doing it?
It has its time and place because, as you said, it's a tool.
It's a tool. Everybody moaned and groaned when Photoshop came out. Oh my God, what are we doing? We don't need photography anymore. Yeah, well, that worked out well, didn't it? Right? We're using AI we use it for. There's tons of grunt work, okay? The loser's job you used to give interns, right?
Copy
That's
and
now we
paste
give that
work.
all of that crap, banner ads and A/B testing and all of that crap. You can give all of that shit to AI and never worry about it again. But that frees us up to do the creative work, the brainstorming stuff.
All the strategy, yeah.
Right? All that stuff which AI can't do. Yet we're trying to fit the square peg of AI into a round hole. It's good at some stuff. Let's do that stuff. And let's not do the other stuff with AI. And I think that's primarily where people are going wrong, because they're saying that their marketing tactics aren't working without realizing that the strategy behind those, strategy first, tactics later, right? But we're missing out on all of that because so many people, firstly, they don't know what marketing is, right? They've maybe been weaned within a company environment and they've seen the person or persons who are in marketing, but the only stuff that they've seen above the waterline has been tactical, right? Has been brochures or events or tote bags or tchotchke crap or that sort of stuff. So they think that's what marketing is. They think it's promotions, right? So the 9/10 that are below the waterline is never seen. But these are the people who are hiring new people to come into the marketing department. So they don't know what they don't know to get these people on board, right? The barrier to entry is so low, right? If I want to go in and be interviewed as a finance person, right? I need to have exams and qualifications and shit, right? If I want to fly a plane, I've got to get a pilot's license, right? if I want to be a surgeon, I've got to spend 6 years in medical school before they let me anywhere near a scalpel, right? But if I want to be a marketer, give me a MacBook Pro and a Creative Suite subscription, right? Sit me down in Starbucks with a flat white. I'm fucking set, aren't I? And that's it. The barrier is set so low. We don't know what we don't know. So we're hiring people for the wrong jobs. And then those people who don't know what they don't know do what they think marketing is, which is all that tactical shit. Yeah. Without any strategic basis to drive the tactical execution. So it's not really a surprise when we run headfirst into a brick wall, is it?
Exactly. And it's no wonder that the C-suite of the organization doesn't have that trust. If you were going to give one piece of advice to a marketer wanting to be a marketer to gain the trust and credibility, what would it be?
I don't think anybody can be in marketing if they haven't sold, if they haven't been in sales. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be a full out and out salesperson. You could be in retail, right? You work behind a bar, right? Unless you can have those kinds of conversations with total strangers to the point where you can influence their buying decision. Oh, we've got a special on this particular wine, or this particular burger has a special kind of cheese that's made in the farm like 20 k's down the road, whatever it may be. I don't believe you can I don't believe you can learn that stuff from a book. Right? It's like, you can't learn to swim by watching a YouTube video, right?
We know that failed. We saw that in the news.
We did. So I think anybody who comes into marketing has to have had some kind of background in sales, number one, because it's all about influencing the behavior of human beings.
Yep, those fickle creatures that change.
And I don't think we can do that any other way. And there's too many people who call themselves marketers who are absolutely shit scared of speaking to strangers. They want to hide behind email or social or whatever. They don't do the voice of the customer stuff. And I don't see how you can be an effective marketer without doing that.
Agree. Where do you see the biggest advances in marketing coming from?
I think the biggest advances in marketing for 2025 and beyond are going to be psychological, not technological. Because I think today, like I said, the barrier to entry is so low, getting lower with AI, okay, MarTech in general. And I think the people who will win will be the people who will get close to the customer and being able to frame their communication, their product, their pricing, all the 4 Ps. I mean, we're talking basic shit here, okay?
Yep.
To actually get every area of the business focused around the customer's expectation of what they perceive as being of value. And that can only be done on a psychological level, right? Otherwise, all we'd need to do to make our targets is put a black and white ad with a bunch of bullet points. We wouldn't need to do anything else. That'd be efficient, but it wouldn't be effective, right? And I think there's a growing chasm between these two schools of marketing. One who is trying to go down a data-driven in terms of driven by data, not driven by the insights that come from the data, if you see what I mean, okay? Yep. So they're letting the numbers dictate the execution versus the behavioral, contextual, emotional component, which is how sales has happened for millennia. That hasn't changed and won't change for certainly our lifetimes and many lifetimes to come, I would suspect. We need to stop wondering about how AI works, how Instagram algorithms work, how LinkedIn works, and we need to start thinking about how do customers work? How does the human mind work? How can we leverage our experience and aptitude, our skills, to best frame and present our value proposition in ways which can easily be consumed by the audiences that we're looking to target? And that's why it used to be the case. 50s, 60s, and certainly the 70s, the greatest marketers of their day were people who understood human behaviour. They were versed in the basics of psychology. Today, we call it behavioural science, but it's a rebranding of psychology, really. It's nothing new, right? But sometimes we have to give it a new name, otherwise millennials won't look at it, right? And I think that's where the marketers of tomorrow need to be looking. Certainly, technology plays a part, of course. But technology doesn't bypass the necessity for effective messaging. AI would never create "I'm loving it" for McDonald's. AI would never come up with "just do it" for Nike. AI would never come up with "think different" for, go on, right? And our job is to create those mental associations for prospective buyers at the time when they are in market. All we can do is be part of that consideration set, so that when they're looking to buy a thing, we are one of those possible options of the thing that they're looking to buy. That's all we can do.
100%. And I agree with you completely that behavioural has probably lost its way for quite a while. And it's now to have that resurgence of how can we tap into the mindset of these consumers in a way that will benefit the business, but the consumer at the same time when they want it, when they need it most.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I have my final question I'd like to ask. What brand, any brand in the world, best represents you and why?
Well, I've had to think about this, and there are a number of brands whose values I identify with deeply, okay? Brands such as Patagonia, or how Apple used to be 20 years ago.
Yep.
Back in the days when it was still a computer company and not a fashion company like it is today, right?
Yep.
But that wasn't your question. You asked me what brand best represents me.
Yes.
Right? And for that, I think I would choose the Japanese brand Muji.
Oh, tell me more. I haven't heard that one.
Or, you haven't heard of Muji?
No.
Okay. And there's no Mujis in Oz? Must be
know.
Mujis in Oz. I mean, you're just next door to Japan. There can't not be Mujis in Oz, right? Or the work of, do you know Dieter Rams?
Yes.
Okay. So, as far as I'm concerned, the world's greatest industrial designer, right? So the work of Dieter Rams when he was at Braun, for example. Okay.
Designs.
So I think both brands share a very similar philosophy in that their value rests in an almost obsessive attention to simplicity. Okay, so Muji defines it as a simplicity achieved through complexity of thought and design. And this is something that, have you heard of a guy called Dave Trott?
No.
Okay, Dave Trott is an advertising veteran. He was the Trott in an ad agency called Go Greenlee's Trot from the 80s, who are responsible for a number of earth-shatteringly wonderful campaigns of the 70s, 80s and early 90s. Dave Trott describes it as simplicity by getting through complexity. To get to simplicity, you have to go through complexity to get to simplicity. Okay, so it's the elimination and subtraction of the gratuitous that's unrelated to function. Okay, I think far too much of the work we do, whatever work that we do, is anchored in ego, in groupthink mentality, in seeking the acknowledgement or admiration of others, often our peers, okay? But such motives are rarely the most appropriate for the only person that matters, who is, of course, the customer, okay? And as an industry, I think we're constantly obsessed with the new, right? We're like magpies, almost
Shiny.
compulsively obsessed by, the next shiny new thing. The result is we end up complicating things. We obfuscate, we clutter, we overwhelm, we gild the lily. It's too easy to give in to the temptation of making our marketing grander than it needs to be, right? Why? Because we love to show off. We want to demonstrate that we know something about a subject that other people don't, right? Unfortunately, that often includes the audience that we're trying to influence, okay? We feel a compulsion to justify our work by making it overly complex. Because we think that if it was as simple as it is, anybody could do it, right? But that's not the case. Instead of embellishment and extrapolation and elaboration, most often what's needed and what's most effective is something simple. But simple is complicated. It's far easier to make something complicated than it is to make it simple. Right? Conveying an idea, a concept in an easy to understand way means having to understand the subject matter at a fundamental level. You have to know your shit, right? Albert Einstein is supposed to have said that, you don't really understand something unless you can explain it to your grandmother, right? Don't know if he really said that, but it's a great quote that has been attributed to him. But, it's probably, I don't know, my Aunt Betsy who said it. I don't know. But it's have you heard of Bill Bernbach?
I have, but doing like everyone else.
So Bill Bernbach, co-founder of Doyle Dane Bernbach, and basically the person who invented great advertising. Okay. The way he described it is that our proper area of study is simple, timeless human truths, which is what Dieter Rams did at Braun. It's what Muji is doing today. And it's something that I personally and professionally align with the outward manifestations of the brand. Probably a longer answer than you were looking for.
No, I think it's absolutely perfect. It aligns exactly with your values. And I think what you're trying to do is demystify a lot of these marketing concepts and jargons so that better decisions can be made, better creativity can be out there. And by doing that is by going back to core and making things simple. There's a lot of complexity behind it, but making it simple for everyone to understand and get on the journey. So I can completely appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing that too.
You're most welcome.
Now, I would love to do a little wrap up of what I have learnt today. Give
Okay.
me one moment, and then I'll ask if you want to add any more in case I missed something. So here we go. So today we were talking all about marketing and how real marketers are actually doing a good job, and ones that want to do a better job can actually make a better difference and contribution to the business and also to consumers. So today we specifically talked about efficiency and effectiveness. And it's very key to understand the difference between these, particularly when you're talking to stakeholders, and how then you can position whatever creativity, campaign, tactic, etc., that you're wanting to execute for the business to your key stakeholders within the business. So efficiency, if you think about that, it's going to be more about thinking of things that have ratios. Is it a per? So how much money do we make back per 1,000? How many clicks per 1,000? Think about this as more of the general data numbers themselves, not the insights, but the numbers. And you're looking at more things like the effort, the money, and the resources behind it, because you want to be efficient with it. You want to get things that they're streamlined, they remove wastage, and you really take out the creativity part of it. So it's really just about being effective with what you've got and getting the most out of it that you can. But again, I have to really repeat, the creativity gets removed from here because you're looking at the bottom line. Whereas effectiveness in marketing is focusing on the behavioral, the context. You're really trying to bring something that is successful towards a goal. You're wanting to build it and be better. And this is where creativity comes in. Now, you want it to be strong and clear and focus on the end results, but also on the target audience as well. So it's more about going out there and finding the behaviors. So you can do this through customer surveys, research, and looking at behaviors. And if we bring this back to a financial context for those that are more inclined there, this is where we talk about the margin incremental revenue. So how much more is this tactic going to give to the business by doing this effectively and hopefully efficiently a little bit in some cases, but how's it actually going to help with the end goal and be different? And by having effectiveness, you're actually able to be more creative and different to your competitors, so you stand out more. So the opportunities here in market could be endless. You could really make something hugely successful because you're tapping into more of the behavioral psychology of your consumers that you're trying to engage with. So from my point of view, it's definitely worth more of that risk factor of a proportion, if you're a bit risk averse, a proportion of your marketing fund to test it. So then you can go back and show that hypothesis has yielded some fabulous results. But we must also caveat, depending on your type of campaign, you may not get results straight away. They may take time. And that's where you need to ensure that you've got some way that you can measure it. But effectiveness also means you've got more opportunity for experimentation. So that means you can really help with those emotional decisions that are coming down from consumers. And you're able to build the trust and reassurance more. Marketers themselves, how can you be more successful when talking with your C-suite to get them to move to more effectiveness type marketing campaigns and tactics compared to just the efficient ones you've probably done forever in a day? You need to know the language. You need to know how to talk to all your C-suite stakeholders, those decision makers. You need to understand that in some cases, the CFO is seen as the right hand. So how can you start talking in a language that's similar to the CFO and not marketing jargon that they might push aside? So this could be working more closely with your finance or commercial team to get them on board. Sales teams are also great to get on board the journey as well before you go to present. Because if you go in as a united front talking the same language, you're more likely to get that endorsement to go and do those tactical campaigns and experimentation. Now, the language doesn't have to be that far away from what you're using today, but you've got to be very mindful of language used by the finance team. Return on investment is a key one that's got very different connotations in the finance area than it does in the marketing. So you've got to ensure that when you are using language, there's something that is simple to understand, but also powerful when it comes to getting your points across and why it's worth going down this path that may be a little bit different than normal. Because let's face it, they're used to having this efficiency going through there. We get X back every month, we get X back every month, X back. You're going to be asking to bring a Y in. So make sure that your Y has got some powerful information behind it. You have actually understood what your consumer needs and an idea of what it could achieve. That presenting this information, again, I cannot stress enough, get the jargon out of it. But as always, when you're doing anything marketing, strategy first, tactics later. So ensure that you have that strategy in place so that when you are presenting to your C-suite, they know this is part of that greater plan and you are going for the ultimate goal of the company. Now, if you do want to get into marketing and you're not quite there yet, or you're new to marketing, or you've been around for a while, it's extremely important to have that voice of customer with you at all times. Now, Gee has said to us today that at least minimum, I'm going to call out minimum here, that should be done every 6 weeks. But for me, I think it should be a lot more, and you should really have your hand on the heart of the customer and know what's going on at all times. And this could be, for me, what I do is I look at social media, because let's just say keyboard warriors tend to be out there, but you can read between the lines a lot of the cases. You always have surveys going out. You could use a product yourself and see how things are going, but always ensure like double jacking on phone lines. There's all different ways that you can be part of that to hear voice of customer. So ensure that you do know that, because having a background in some kind of sales, you might have even worked at the local fashion shop and sold clothes for a while and help people make decisions on those clothing. That helps you understand consumer behavior, how they think, how you could influence them, how you help them, their language. And that's a great skill set to have to then bring on your journey of being a marketer as well. But always don't forget, it's based on behavioral psychology. That is what we're doing. As marketers, we are influencing decisions, whether for the good or the bad. And we need to ensure that we are in the right way presented so that we're part of the consideration for in the future when they are choosing to make those purchases. Anything else to add there, G?
That's a great summary, Susan. I just say, at the end of the day, we have to be less average. Okay, people are stuck in this rut of trying to be the same as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in the middle of the road, all that happens is you get run over, right? The magic happens at the periphery. Nobody remembers the people in the middle. So you need to take a stand, and you need to be, I wouldn't say you need to be brave, because, that's putting it, but you need to be clearly differentiated in the mind of your target audience. And to do that means going against the grain. But if you don't do that, you won't be noticed, so you're wasting your money anyway. So a creative component is one way of differentiating yourself. It could be product, it could be features, it could be pricing, it could be distribution, it could be in any one of a number of things, or maybe all of these things together. But one thing is for certain, if, as I think it was Stephen Covey said, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting, right? Things need to change, because you can bet that the guys on the other side of the game, your competitors, are definitely thinking of ways to upend the status quo. So you need to be that much ahead of them.
Agree. I think that's a great end piece for you to share with us as well, is always strive for greatness, because there's always going to be competitors at your tail even when you become number one. So always ensure that you've got your heart down with your consumers to understand their behavior, to then improve as you need to as well.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, G, for today. And I'll have all of his details in the show notes. Don't forget, he's already welcomed you all to follow and stalk him on LinkedIn. He will have 2 videos every week to share with you on passion topics that he's come across. They may be ranting, they may be funnies, who knows, but join him every week to enjoy those. And everyone else, don't forget to follow More to Marketing so that you can hear some more fabulous guests. More to Marketing.